Welcome. We are here. It's Thursday night. It is the Audible Live Football Guys live watch party here for Thursday Night Football. We're here, Matt. We are in week one. We're watching the Eagles and Cowboys right before halftime. The Eagles have moved it down the field. Both of these teams have been moving it back and forth. We have multiple touchdowns from Javonte Williams, multiple rushing touchdowns from Jalen Hurts, a big shot play, Jahan Dotson down the field to get the Eagles into scoring position. And it's my good friend Matt Waldman, and we talked the last couple of years during Thursday night, and we are back to do that again. And Matt, how are you doing? Are you ready for this season to be here? Are you? What's your mind around in regards to that?
Yeah, well, cheers everybody. Happy opening night. For the NFL, and hopefully we, can continue to enjoy this year round and then have an exciting season. And obviously great to catch up with you, Jeff, and I think we're gonna have a good time. But yeah, I mean, this is it's always an exciting time because as everybody says, it's the great reveal. We're gonna get a chance to see over the next probably 4 to 6 weeks what's going on, and then once we think we know, then it'll change again, and that's kind of the fun of all this. So we have some fun things to talk about in the next half hour. We're gonna play our own version of the watch party roundtable with some of the ideas that we talked with our staff to earlier this week, and then also talk about Jeff has a really good topic about what running about who we are looking forward to seeing the great reveal with, and are there false flags with some of that. So I mean, to start with, where do you want to start? I mean, you pick. We can spin the wheel here. We only got 3 topics to spin, but hey, let's do it.
I like your idea about players that I wish I had more of, because one of the guys that I wasn't necessarily often by any regards at all, but I did way too many best ball drafts this summer. And so a guy that I often saw players in the range that I just took instead, George Pickens is a player with the Cowboys offense, where I think from what we're seeing so far against this Eagles defense, and part of it that is aided by Jalen Carter not being in this game, but I think Dallas has moved the ball at will against the Eagles defense. And I don't think that very many people carried that expectation coming into this game. I think that given the concerns around the offensive line, the expectation was the Eagles would pretty much stifle Dallas's offense. They look really good, and they haven't quite connected yet downfield with George Pickens. There's been a couple penalties that have played into that, or maybe potential penalties that have played into that. But Pickens opposite CeeDee Lamb, I think CeeDee Lamb, we know what he's going to do. He's going to be moved around formation. He's going to get open. He's going to be CeeDee Lamb. But I think the potential here for George Pickens to have a really massive year is there. I just didn't end up with a lot of him because Jameson Williams was in a similar range. I was choosing him over Pickens. I was often choosing Xavier Worthy over George Pickens in a similar range. Devontae Adams was falling into that range, and that was an easy choice for me. And so I didn't get very much Pickens because there were other receivers that I ended up going in that direction.
Yeah, I understand. I think a player that I wish I had any of that I didn't get to pick was Ashton Jeanty. I really love his game, and I love that he's got the coaching staff. I'm a little suspect about the line, though. I think if Sincere McCormick did what he did last year, he'll be just fine. But where he was picked, I mean, again, ADP, when you have a shot at, a number 1 wide receiver, or even Derrick Henry. Yep. I mean, I'm going with Derrick Henry. Sorry. Next year, 2 years from now, I'll be going with Ashton Jeanty. Dynasty, unless I'm in a win now situation, Ashton Jeanty all the way. So it's not that I didn't love his talent. I think he's got potential to be a rare talent in this league. I just don't think this was the year. Since I went second, we can do I'll double up, and I'll give my second one after that, and then hand it back to you. But Xavier Worthy, I've been feeling strong about Xavier Worthy all off season. And the fact that they finally got a left tackle who just looks good. I mean, athletic. The scoop blocks I watch this guy make are impressive. And if you don't know what a scoop block is, it's when you have to basically go maybe 2 gaps over sometimes to get inside of a defensive end and from the snap. And if you can get position on an NFL defender doing that, listen, this Simmons kid can do that. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to be going deep, and they've said that's what they've wanted to do. And Xavier Worthy's the man to do that. If there is a receiver in football that we haven't seen explode yet, who is very capable of doing that, Xavier Worthy is on that very short list.
Yeah, I love that call out. Our friend of the program, Dave Kluge, and I on the Dynasty Show, we did our flag plant players for this year. And Xavier Worthy was my flag plant wide receiver. I've been loading up everywhere that I possibly can. There's a lot involved in that. I mean, first off, the fastest player in the NFL, and you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid figuring out ways to get the ball in his hands. Yes, I want all of that. And then me being a long-suffering Bills fan, I have a pretty good idea how trades with the Chiefs work out between these two organizations. And so, seeing Keon Coleman struggle to get open, and there's just not a universe where Xavier Worthy doesn't end up very good. And I don't sit here thinking, what would Josh Allen look like if he had Xavier Worthy just running wide open downfield with Josh Allen's arm talent there. So Xavier Worthy is a guy that I've been able to grab, but for me, going back to the well, Josh Simmons, you talk about Ohio State there, solidifying that Chiefs offense. Another Ohio State Buckeye, TreVeyon Henderson, is a player that I got him a lot early. So I did a couple of drafts like in May, and he was about a 6th round pick then. And I was grabbing him in the 6th round, but then he spiked himself up into the 3rd, 4th round in some drafts. And that was just too steep of a price for me. And so kind of once the positive news came in off training camp and we started to see some of those highlights come out, and I just tend to believe that there is going to be a committee there with the Patriots that I think that if there's one person in the NFL that likes Ramondre Stevenson, it's Josh McDaniels. And I tend to think that Stevenson's going to be more involved than we would like. But even though I do believe that, the James White on steroids that TreVeyon Henderson can present, I think is there. It was just one, again, when you're looking at like that 3rd and 4th round and some of the other potential backs that are on the board or some of the wide receivers, I tended to go grab the early running backs this year. Just, we saw that great year last year that those bell cow backs gave us. And there still was it was not quite as severe as it was last year in terms of the 0 wide receiver approach and pushing talent at running back down. But there's a lot of running back talent that you could get at picks that normally you wouldn't be. A guy like Jonathan Taylor in the middle of the late 2nd round is a guy that not that long ago, he would have been a slam dunk top 5 pick. Or a guy like Chase Brown is another one that I think that not that long ago, he probably would have been a slam dunk 1st round pick as well.
All right, so we're going to do our version of the 3rd round reversal. I'll go one, and then I want to hear 2 more from you, and then I'll give one more. I'll just mention this, though, about Ramondre Stevenson. I mean, like, if I'm going to defend him because I like him, is that he is a more experienced inside runner of a variety of plays where he does understand what it's like to play with a crappy offensive line and how to manage that well enough to keep your offensive playbook open. And I'm not sure Henderson has proven enough yet with interior plays. I think he's a good tight crease runner. And the nuance I would argue against TreVeyon is that when he knows there's a crease there, he will hit it hard. And even if it's tight, that's great. If it's a complete lemons play, he shuts down more often and he's got to work through that. Whereas Ramondre is a little better with that. Now you're not going to get 80-yard runs on ever probably from Ramondre in the regular season doing that kind of thing. But you are going to get a lot of singles and doubles hits that keep the things alive. So he gives a good ramp up for Henderson as he continues to acclimate to the league. And Henderson could get there to the point that Ramondre is very expendable. And it could happen later this year. For me, it's Jameson Williams. I've gotten him in some leagues, But the fact that he's going to get to run a full route tree this year is very exciting. Um, and it's just that there were other players I found more appealing. Some of them ended up getting hurt or had issues that I'm kind of wishing. I wish I just took the chance on Williams here rather than going for what I thought was safe, but didn't turn out to be so safe. So especially within his own division, we'll talk about him in a minute. But Williams is someone that you can just see he's been the big play guy, but at Alabama we knew he could be more than that. And now that they're ready to basically take off the governor on him, it's very possible that he could lead this team in yardage, even though Amon-Ra St. Brown is an elite slot flanker combo.
Yeah, and that's been another player that I've been very aggressive ahead of market on is Jameson Williams. I've been loading up there because you're right. We saw in Alabama just really the way his game blossomed. And I think that with that speed and kind of the way he's been introduced to the NFL, I don't think people understand what he did that year with Bryce Young. I still believe he should have been the Heisman Trophy winner that year that Bryce Young won the Heisman Trophy. If you really watched Alabama, I mean, he made Bryce Young the first overall pick in the draft, and I think he should have gotten that Heisman. And then in that title game, the moment he went out with that injury, that's when Alabama just disintegrated against Georgia, and they were able to make that comeback. And so I think that that's a really good call out there, and somebody that I've been targeting. But it really comes down to one, the ability that you're right, the ability that he can do more, but two, having a second set of eyes there, a second different coordinator coming in there. And it's like the type of thing of like Ben Johnson, like Amon-Ra St. Brown is Ben Johnson's guy, and Amon-Ra St. Brown helped Ben Johnson get the Bears job, but then a new voice comes into the room and new decision maker comes in there and sees the dynamic, that ability that Jameson Williams brings. I like to compare. I end up often comparing wide receivers to basketball players and looking at basketball sense. And I feel like Amon-Ra St. Brown is the type of like, he's really, really good at what Amon-Ra St. Brown does. And it's kind of more like a Shaq almost, or like maybe like a Klay Thompson who like, he just can shoot from forever away, or like Shaq can just score in the paint, no problem. But then Jameson Williams is like the Kevin Durant of like, he can shoot from anywhere, but also he can drive and he can do just the variety of things that I think he can bring as a number one receiver into there, and a new coach coming in there to open it up. I like that call out quite a bit.
Nice. So who's your third round reversal guy?
My third round reversal guy, Ladd McConkey, is a guy that I really wish I would have gotten a lot more of. And some of that falls into I covered the Chargers preseason reports, and it was, Jim Harbaugh called him uncoverable, and he started out camp, he had an injury, missed a couple of practices, and then it was the type of thing of, it was fun reading about the reports there, and Daniel Topper for The Athletic does a really good job covering the Chargers, and he had one where it was, Dave and I were talking about the preseason reports and how often with the star players, you just don't really read a lot about the star players because beat writers are talking about like fringe. It's almost like Hard Knocks. They're talking about the fringe roster guys, or they're talking about the new rookies, the new arrivals. And then they'll occasionally have a piece of like, Ladd McConkey just tore everybody up in practice and made like defensive backs fall down and everything else. And I think that Ladd McConkey is going to have a massive, massive season. I think that he's a player that really, when you look at last year, middle of the season, I think that naturally people viewed him as more of a slot like only receiver, but really when you watched him at Georgia, he was a downfield vertical threat. That's really what he was doing in Georgia. And so his ability to transfer to be a slot early in his career speaks to his prowess and ability that, and then in the middle of the year, they inverted him and Quentin Johnston because they said Quentin Johnston can't catch the ball downfield. So we'll just throw him to the ball short and we'll let Ladd McConkey destroy people downfield. And that's when that true breakout, I think, happened with McConkey. But he was a guy, he was going in the second round, and it ended up being, again, like a Jonathan Taylor was usually on the board or something like that. And I ended up grabbing the running back instead of McConkey in those positions.
Yeah, I feel like it's funny being all in on Ladd McConkey last year. I don't think I have a single Ladd McConkey pick from redraft this year, just because of where it was priced and relative to what I was trying to get and what seemed like the better values. Uh, okay, so an obvious pick I don't have to say much on. I'll just say Patrick Mahomes. I wish I had more of him. I think I always kind of wish I had more of him, but I have enough of him in Dynasty. But in redraft, I'd never seem to get him. But the weird one that I wish I had more of was Najee Harris, and only because I you know I had the benefit of having family members who know a little bit about the human eye, and they gave me good information with limited info that they shared. And if they said if it was the way that I described, that probably he'd be ready to play week 1. And I asked my dad, well, sorry, Joe, in advance. I said, so is this, when they said it was a straightforward injury, a superficial injury, was that bullshit or not? And my 80-year-old father, who's been, treating, who's been treating Olympic athletes and eye injuries for a better part of a 50-year career until he retired a number of years recently, his answer was, no, that part's bullshit, but the healing thing can be pretty straightforward. He said and so they probably didn't want to get into it because it's not their call. Najee Harris probably didn't want them, So, but if it's what I thought it was, it's a Halima, and it was an anterior chamber of the eye. So anyway, looking at that, I just think Najee Harris got a raw deal from the Steelers and the Steelers media and the Steelers fans, because I jokingly say, as a Jim Brown fan who ragged on Franco Harris, Steelers fans don't know anything about running backs, but they think they do. They didn't know anything. They didn't know anything about Le'Veon Bell year 1. They didn't know anything about James Conner until they kicked his ass out. And we'll see how that goes down the line. But they thought Anthony McFarland was going to be all that too. But seriously, to take away from that, I just think it's more that the offensive line wasn't great. The quarterback situation was worse, and defenses knew what was coming. And Najee Harris didn't have much room to operate, and he did the best that he could. I think he's going to have a better time in San Diego. And San Diego's been saying this whole time, we're leaving room for you. I know everybody's all Amari and Hampton, like they're ready for the old Amari and Hampton party to begin. But they're a year early. They're at least a year early, I think, or an injury to Najee Harris early, because Harris, I've heard an argument from the beat writers saying, well, they both have to learn the offense. Okay, come on now. Najee Harris may have to learn the offense, but he doesn't have to learn how fast box defenders are in the NFL. He doesn't have to learn how to identify blitz disguises. He doesn't have to learn the different things that happen from NFL team to NFL team, that it's like playing there. He doesn't have to learn how to adjust to the professional grind. Omari Hampton has all that to learn. Plus, he's moved to a new city, and he's gotten a new contract and new money and the problems that can come with that. Najee's already got that nailed down, even if it's a new city and a new thing. So really, I just think this is going to be a split all year until there's an injury. And I would I wouldn't have minded grabbing him at the deal that he was, because it wouldn't shock me at all if he's the red zone runner, because he's the smarter runner right now.
I like that a lot. And it comes to mind so often. We see like everything around the fantasy football industry is like trying to fit into like different themes and whatnot. And like buy low is one that like everybody hits, and buy low I feel like is done wrong by everybody, because buy low, everybody is always talking about the buzzy player as like the buy low of like the guy that everybody wants is not the buy low. The buy low is the Najee Harris that makes you like lose sleep, that you send a second round pick for Najee Harris that you recognize like this could go horribly wrong.
Right.
That's a buy low.
Buy lows are the ones that people go, you're nuts for liking that guy.
Yes. Yeah. It's so funny because it's never presented that way in content, because like people don't want to say like go buy Najee Harris, because everybody will be like, you're an idiot. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like an initial reaction, but that's a true buy low. And I like that call out a lot. And I think that you're right there And again, I had covered the Chargers camp, and I'm on the Hampton bandwagon to some extent. I think the bigger Najee Harris is definitely a concern in terms of getting there, but also passing volume, I think, is a concern of the running backs. And I think that we see that a lot with like pushback on like Justin Herbert or like the wide receivers. I'm not particularly concerned about the wide receivers in terms of passing volume because they don't mess around. They just throw it to the wide receivers. It's that the running backs don't get the passing volumes, and the tight end is just a smorgasbord of nothingness unless Oronde Gadsden learns how to block in a very, very short order. And so it's the type of thing of like, I think that Ladd McConkey, you talked about him. I think Quentin Johnston was a screaming value in drafts where he ended up like, as soon as they added Trey Harris, everybody just forgot about Johnson, and especially Keenan Allen coming in there. Like Johnson's completely left for dead, but he's going to be on the field in 2 receiver sets. He's a starting receiver for them. He's going to be out there, and so I think that that's a good value there. I think mine just Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen in general, because where they were going, like, just made it very difficult for me to pull the trigger on them there. And I think the depth of quarterback this year, I think I waited on quarterback more this year than I ever have, because, you know, there's guys like Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence or Jordan Love that you could get way late. And grabbing 2 of those guys and ending up with a starter out of those. I think Caleb Williams was going way too late for fantasy, but I just could never justify Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. I mean, being a Bills fan, having Josh Allen on my fantasy team is a whole lot of fun. I've got him on my home dynasty league, but and then Lamar Jackson too, just the ceiling is there. I mean, we got a Ravens guy here, so everybody knows the ceiling for Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And I did see, I think last year they were kind of more in that 4th, 5th turn, and it was a lot more comfortable grabbing those guys there. This year they were kind of more in like the 2-3 turn, and it just felt very aggressive to grab a quarterback at that level.
I agree. Unless I was in a super flex league where I was picking early and I just said, screw it, let me get Lamar Jackson right now. That I was with you in that regard. So how about players we regret we drafted as much of that we did?
It's too early to say regret, because I still feel very good about the price that I got him at. I drafted a lot of Isaiah Pacheco. I didn't understand the value that the industry was putting on Isaiah Pacheco because I've seen like the consensus ranks had him outside of being a top 24 running back too. And to me, I've got him at running back 17 was where I ended up with in my final rank. But having a guy that many had outside of running back 24 as your running back 17, it leads you to pushing the button every time he would come around. And so that's one that makes me nervous, only because maybe we haven't seen it over a full season, or I guess I don't even know why it makes me nervous, because I don't think that there's really anybody banging down the door to take the job away from him there. And there's a goofy narrative that the Chiefs can't run the ball, or that they want to play this ball control. And, you know, you had the call out there with Patrick Mahomes. I think that we're just going to get a scorched earth tour from this Chiefs offense. And, I kind of a couple weeks ago, it clicked to me, and every single, the ability to kind of flashing back to like the Peyton Manning, like Denver Broncos teams where like the 50 touchdown passes, and you had Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker and like all those guys on their team, and you just would steamroll. You could do that with the Chiefs this year, with where you could draft Xavier Worthy, where Rashee Rice ended up after the suspension, with Isaiah Pacheco, with Patrick Mahomes. And I started to try to do that.
Kelce.
And Travis Kelce too. I drafted a whole lot of Travis Kelce too. And just because all those pieces there, and I guess probably maybe the Chiefs in general, because I do think that we have very real potential to see a 50 touchdown type Mahomes season. But then off that, Mahomes didn't hit 4,000 yards last year. And so there is the chance that it is a little bit more of a ball control team. I think that they're going to break that narrative though. And having pieces of the Chiefs is where you want to be.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. The guy for me was, I thought people were absolutely slap off nuts for saying that Jaden Reed was as low as he was in ADP. I was taking him everywhere because I'm like, are you kidding me? He's never been anything but worse than a wide receiver too. So what if he plays part-time in that role. He's their best overall receiver on that team. Even with Matthew Golden coming in and impressing in camp, a healthy Jaden Reed, what are you talking about? He's part Debo Samuel. He's part Stephon Diggs, like in the sense of how they used him in the low red zone and how they used him as a route runner. I mean, he's an excellent young player. And then we find out in the past week and a half that he's got a Jones fracture in his foot and that he's going to try and play through it. But that's the type of injury that usually you get shut down and you're going to need surgery. So they're just hoping that somehow he can manage his way through that. Yeah, that happens. And to me, like, I got a question today from somebody who just followed me on Twitter and said, how do you feel about Christian McCaffrey and his calf injury, considering that you had him number one over Jamar Chase in his own tier? And I'm like, did anybody know that he had a calf issue until tonight? Here's the thing. You should, you draft with the things you know, and you prepare for the fact that there's a likelihood that there's going to be 1 to 4 players on your team where something happens. And you got to deal with it. That's how you manage the game. Are you just going to give up and go, woe is me? Or are you going to figure out ways to make this work? Because I've won more championships with teams that I've made work than having perfect drafts. I mean, I can probably count on 2 fingers where I looked at my draft and said, I did not change and I've been playing since 1994. And I can count 2 drafts where I go, I didn't change a single player on my roster. And I started pretty much the lineup I thought I was going to start those years. And they were special years, and I haven't only won 2 championships in my lifetime. So, I mean, it is what it is. So when you look at Reed, it's disappointing that this is happening. And I wish I didn't draft as much of him. But it's one of those things in hindsight that it's like, do I regret it? No, because it wasn't like I knowingly drafted him with a Jones fracture. I drafted him with the information that I knew. I just wish that the information came out a lot earlier, and it would have been different.
Yeah, that, and I think that's an interesting one because we saw the comments from his agent right after they used that first round pick on Matthew Golden. So I think that Reed doesn't envision himself long for the Green Bay organization and has kind of put himself in an awkward position of trying to maintain and maybe enhance market value and get somebody to go out and go and get him, because I don't think that the money that he thinks he should get is going to be coming from Green Bay. And especially after that draft pick was used on Matthew Golden, I think that was kind of an admission on, and it was kind of a statement to Reed on, we view you in your role. And I think that there was a lot of you that Matt LaFleur wanted to have these like receivers that are very role specific. And I said at the time of the draft of like, well, I think that they wanted that guy that can move around, that can be that Golden, that can be that guy that can unlock. Because when you have that guy, it unlocks everything else.
Yes.
You can have that room full of specialists, but it's again like the basketball analogy of like, if there's a LeBron James here, like you can have a team with the Cleveland Cavaliers that they're just specialists, that this guy can only shoot threes, and like Goskis and Anderson Varejao, like that team back from it's nearly 20 years ago at this point. But it wasn't not a talented team outside of LeBron James, but because of LeBron James, everybody just was allowed to do their roles only, and it made everything work to have that one guy. And I think that draft pick with Matthew Golden was the admission of we don't have that guy that can just click here and make everything else work for all these other receivers. And I think Jaden Reed probably envisioned himself as that player.
Yes.
And the Packers said, well, we don't think you are that player. And I think
I think you're absolutely right. I think that Matt LaFleur sees Jaden Reed as a Stephon Diggs starter kit in terms of what Stephon Diggs was as a slot receiver in Minnesota. I think Jaden Reed and folks like Matt Harmon and I probably see Jaden Reed more as Stephon Diggs after he left Minnesota and was a number 1 caliber receiver for a while. And we're going to find out whether Green Bay was wrong. I got to say this about Green Bay. I do not have a good feeling about that offense at all. And I did before, but with Reed gone, maybe it's because I'm such a fan of Reed. I think Golden's going to have a good year. I think Kraft and Musgrave will be interesting, but I kind of feel like that this boat is not in good hands with Jordan Love. Like he could turn the corner and maybe just had a regression type of year, but I'm not completely sold on him. And I feel like the way that they play offense and the players that they got, this could be one of those teams where, it falls apart this year. Like it falls apart in a nasty way. And we're looking at, well, they got Matthew Golden, but now we need a quarterback. Like there's a part of me when we heard that trade for Micah, I forget his last name right
Parsons.
off. Parsons, yeah. That there's a part of me that I was said on our message board, I kind of joked. I'm like, I'd actually would have liked for them to trade for Dallas's quarterback in the offseason, maybe like in January. I would have been excited about that. That's just kind of how I'm feeling about Love right now. I just like, if there's a team that I think that the rug's going to get pulled out from under, for some reason, Green Bay feels like that to me. We'll see.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that you've given to me is the view on quarterbacks, where it's kind of like the first 15 games or so of their career, and then the next 15 games of their career, and the first 15 games of teams really having vanilla defenses against them. Let's figure this guy out. Let's figure out, you so often go to that analogy of boxing, like let's figure out where like they can't cover in a fight, and then these next 15 games we're just going to attack that area. And I think that Love seems to me a patient zero for that, really, where it's like just so much immediate success when the expectation was that a fall off with Aaron Rodgers, and because of Aaron Rodgers, because of this step from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, we all thought the Packers did it again. Look at this. And then it was like that those next 15 games, I think Love just didn't make the adjustment. And then I have some friends that follow the Packers and talk to them a little bit about kind of the way that they went so run heavy last year, and internally the people around the team view it as it was all because of Love's injury. They just they knew they had Josh Jacobs. They knew they could run the ball. They knew they had good defense. They knew they could win games if they just protected Jordan Love with the injury. And the expectation is now a healthy Jordan Love, who, by the way, has a different injury, but coming off now, like the expectation is getting back to what they saw early in his career there as a starter. And I'm with you there. I think that it's really iffy on what direction that's going to end up going there for him. And a lot hinges on that, obviously.
Very cool. Anybody else that we have any regrets with, or do we need a game update? Or
Stephon Diggs is the guy that I do have regrets with.
Okay.
You kind of went there with Jaden Reed, and I think early there were the reports of him getting back, and early on, back in the free agent period, I was flabbergasted at the money that they gave Stephon Diggs, because to me, seeing him the last days in Buffalo and then kind of the player he was in Houston, I kind of thought that we were in a different stage of Stephon Diggs' career than the money that they gave him. And then, there was positive reports he's back at camp, and you look at that receiver room, and I think it was natural to say, well, they have a lot of these types of receivers. They don't really have a Stephon Diggs type receiver. You could see him being like the every down the Stephon Diggs for Drake May. And then I think that has fizzled out now, and I'm very concerned about where I was drafting when I was drafting Stephon Diggs. Just in general, there, I listened to your show with Bob earlier in the week with Kayshon Boutte with that mention. As we were closing towards, I was grabbing some Kayshon Boutte in drafts where I could. Demario Douglas is a player that I've targeted heavily all off season because of just I think he's pretty locked into that slot role. We know that what that role can be in that offense, and he was just a value all off season. But Diggs, I had moved around and I was grabbing him, and then it got to the point I was like, I really wish I hadn't been doing that.
That's funny. After that show, in our Football Guys IDP Dynasty League, I traded away Stephon Diggs and Tank Bigsby for a second round pick, and Kayshon Boutte. and I knew that I probably could have gotten more, but I didn't want to dicker around with it, and just figured I have depth at running back. I mean, I've got Derrick Henry, I've got James Cook, I've got Chuba Hubbard and Nick Chubb, and some rookies that I like. And I was just like, I'm not using Tank. Let's get out of here. Let's get a second round pick in this deal. And if Butte plays to the way that I think, then Diggs will probably be an afterthought in this offense compared to what relatively people are thinking. So yeah, I feel you there. So let's talk about your idea of like your topic, and round the show out with what are unveils that you're paying close attention to, that you either are, you're looking for signs of, okay, this is the way we're going to be going, or things that you're maybe expecting some false flags early on.
I think the natural one is this Commanders backfield. The way that there has been so much talk about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and I know that that's a player that you were first, but I feel like I liked him quite a bit when
I just was watching him earlier. That's all it is.
Yeah,
it has nothing to do
but
with.
You put the work in to be able to be in position to be there,
Sure.
So you do deserve credit there. But and then the hype just got so far out of control. Yeah. And so far over the skis. And we saw that preseason game, and Chris Rodriguez started over him in that preseason game when they played the starters. And then the next game, Krosky-Merritt was in a non-contact situation and didn't play, and it was assigned as like, he's the starter now. He didn't play. Well, he was in a non-contact situation because of an injury. And I think that when you look at Cliff Kingsbury's backfield, where he was, Cliff Kingsbury, to me, I don't know where you stand on this, but the offensive genius label that gets assigned to him, I think has a whole lot to do with a guy that was playing quarterback for him in Texas Tech at one point in time, and a whole not a whole lot to do with some other stuff. But
you mean Peter Principle? Is he synonymous with Peter Principle?
Yeah. Well, and some of the shine of Mike Leach probably rubbing off on him, and just kind of right place, right time. Probably a lot there. But in Arizona, we saw a pretty dedicated backfield with Kenyon Drake and with Chase Edmonds, very role specific backfield there. And I tend to believe that would be the lean here with the Commanders, with Chris Rodriguez getting that first crack. But then at the back of my mind too, I really like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt as prospect, and I think that the potential is potentially there for the type of thing where we see a week one that it is Rodriguez in that role, in that early down role, but Rodriguez doesn't exactly wow in it, and then quickly flips to Krosky-Merritt.
I couldn't invest that high once we got into mid-August. No. It was just got ridiculous. Like in all through the spring and early summer, where you could get them like after the 15th round, sure. Even though things were going really good, but once you got inside the 10th, really inside the 12th round, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. There's no way I'm doing that. So I'm with you. And also, look, maybe we're just jealous of Cliff Kingsbury's, house that he seemed to show off in the magazines. But really, he is one of those guys. Is he one of those guys, Brandon, Angela and I were talking about last night? Is he one of those guys that will give Jaden Daniels an opportunity to open up the playbook and have some say with offense? Or is he one of those guys like Sean McVay that wants to be the puppet master with everybody? And if it's what we've seen in the past, it's more of the puppet master stuff. And that could be bad for this entire team. Because, again, Jaden Daniels' first 15 games looked great, showed what he could do outside the scope of the offense when they let him, or when he was forced to. And he did some, but they did a lot of conservative stuff with him behind the line of scrimmage, and it worked very well. And then in clutch moments, when they unleashed him, he showed some stuff right there that was really good. But again, defenses have a whole season of tape, and and they have they have Terry McLaurin, and then they have a running back playing wide receiver in Deebo Samuel, a pretty darn good receiving running back, but not really a press man, high-end guy, other than like a lot of behind near the line of scrimmage work and occasionally and some zone plays, which, that's still healthy, but this is not as dynamic of a looking offense as maybe it appears. And I think there's some chances here that defenses are going to, if anything holds up with Cliff Kingsbury in the past, we're going to see this offense shut down this year in ways that people didn't expect and might not get the return on investment. I'm hoping against that, but I think that's a real possibility. I cannot wait to see Michael Penix for a full season with Drake London inside, with Kyle Pitts put in a situation where it's like, come on, buddy, this is what you needed. You haven't even had this with Matt Ryan when you got into the league. You're going to get a guy who's going to do what you supposedly do best, which is throw your ass open. And if that doesn't happen, then I propose right now, Jeff, as a resident of Atlanta who is not a Falcons fan, but at least has a vested interest here, I propose that we free Dalton Kincaid from the clutches of Joe Brady, who wants to use him as a flat route player and not as a contested catch player. In the name of fantasy, we switch these two guys, and we let Kyle Pitts be whatever they want him to be in Buffalo. And then we move Dalton Kincaid to Atlanta, where he can actually be the Dalton Kincaid at Utah that we saw. But I cannot wait to see some of these throws. We're going to see some wild throws that we don't normally see in the NFC, that we see with some AFC quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow in different ways. But Penix has that kind of arm, and there's some flash on some of those plays. There's a Carolina throw last year that still kind of takes my breath away. I don't know if it was the best decision, but it was definitely a wild throw, and the offensive line's good enough. I'm stoked to watch this team.
There's one that, and it'll probably come right to your mind right away, against the Commanders in that back and forth game. The Pitts, it was about a 15-yard in that Kyle Pitts has not had a quarterback that has been able to hit him on that route, and Penix just drilled it in. I think it was a fourth down. It was a gotta have it play towards the end of that game. And it was the type of thing of like there's the meme where the guy like sits up on the couch. Like that was literally me. Like as that I was like, oh, okay, we got something going on here. And that was the throw that Kyle Pitts is not a quarterback that's been able to make that throw, and Kyle Pitts was able to make that catch, but Michael Penix, more importantly, was able to put it into that window. And I mean, when you look at Jalen McMillan had some flashes. Jalen Polk, I think we're about done there. Roma Dunze, maybe it'll take off this year, but maybe Michael Penix was making those guys more than other things. But he's a guy that he stood out. I go back to COVID times when he was Indiana's quarterback. There was a game against Penn State, and Indiana football
remember that game.
Yes. And people, Indiana football that made the playoffs last year, that was the idea that they could hang with a Michigan, Penn State, or Ohio State was just absolutely ridiculous. And Michael Penix, I think it went to overtime that game, but it was a different Michael Penix because it was back when he could move, but he had that dive for the end zone that maybe he did, maybe he didn't get there, but they gave it to him because it was the Big Ten had a delay start from COVID, and that was painful enough. But then football finally started, and Penn State and Indiana played each other right away, and that play definitely still sticks in my memory of and it's one of those that you just see it with these guys of like in those positions of like, I think like through the scouting process, through all that, just the guys that make the big play in the big moment. Like my all-time favorite Ohio State player is Will Allen. He's a safety and he's safety nickelback. And people would be like, why is he your favorite player? But there was a window when back in 2002, when they won the national championship against Miami, and then the next year where it was literally every single gotta have it moment. Will Allen was the guy that did it. And it was like he had an interception that ended the Michigan game in the the season that they won the national championship. There was a Phillip Rivers NC State game that I'm pretty sure went to overtime that he had a game-winning interception on the goal line. It was just like that type of thing where it was like every single time a game-ending play or a game-shifting play, he was the guy that blew up Williams McGahee's knee. And I mean, that's an unfortunate thing that happened to McGahee, but that was a major momentum-shifting play in that game. It was just the type of thing where he was always that guy in the middle of the spot, and he was always made the play.
Legion of Boom had like 3 or 4 players on that defense in their defensive backfield, their back seven, from Bobby Wagner to Cam Chancellor to their corner.
Earl Thomas was one of those guys.
Thomas.
Like Earl Thomas always, like Ed Reed was one of those guys. Ed Reed always made. Oh yeah, he was just always there. Like he just knew always where to be, and like that's what like Adonai Mitchell is a guy like that for me. Of like we didn't see him put it together, but when he was at Georgia and then at Texas, it was like he caught a touchdown in every single one of Georgia's playoff games. Like that type of guy that just like kind of in the periphery, but oh, we're in a playoff game, and of course Adonai Mitchell is going to catch a touchdown here. It's like one of those types of things, like those guys that continue to be in that spot and deliver in that spot. I just will always believe that they're going to work out.
Okay, so let's end this way. Craziest prediction. Let's go anti Joe Bryant here, because like when I did, and Joe, we love you, but like we everyone does bold predictions. And I've joked that I do insanity predictions because I want to border on the edge of like the absurd, but there's enough but challenge you to actually think about it a couple of times. Let's just go slap off crazy just for the fun of it to end it. And, if we may be able to jokingly take credit for it, but it's got to be beyond the edge of sanity. I'll start because I've got one right off the bat. I think that Isaiah Bond is going to give you about 800 to 900 yards receiving and about 7 touchdowns this year as a rookie with Joe Flacco. And it's going to reinforce to Cleveland that apparently spent an entire offseason that they were trying to draft character guys who had no off-field problems. Quinshaw Junkins was one of those guys who like very clean, record. You had some people who went to social media to bat for him and got beat up on for basically saying, listen, I mean, I didn't investigate him, but I've talked to a lot of these guys. He would be the last guy that I thought all this went down with. And now they're dickering with the guaranteed money, even though, I read the DA report and, it's a lot more nuanced than how people say. Okay. I'll just put it that way. Meanwhile, Isaiah Bond is more of the choice of Cleveland going, you know what? Screw it. This guy's so good. As scouts would say, as a scout I know would say, some teams say, yeah, we want to hire character guys until that Hannibal Lecter can run a 4.340. And not that, Isaiah Bond is anything close to Hannibal Lecter, but his charges were pretty darn serious. So it would be a total Brownsian thing for them to make a concerted effort to hire character guys. Go with Isaiah Bond. Isaiah Bond turns out to be not that much of a character guy, possibly. Ends up doing great for them. And Jimmy Flying J, pilot guy, is like, yep, forget that whole idea of hiring character guys again. Because, I mean, I won't say anything more about that. But, I could see where Cleveland just gets a little bit more like Machiavellian about it all after all. So that's my wild prediction. What's yours?
Xavier Legette is the leading Panthers fantasy point scorer at the wide receiver position, leading receiver, and just not Tedero McMillan or Jalen Coker. Xavier Legette ends up being the Panthers wide receiver you want to have.
Sweet.
And so I see it as I think that it plays into probably both sides of this, but I'm curious your thoughts on this because it does seem to me we saw obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, and then I think maybe Quentin Johnson might be a little bit of it, but it seems to like Rome Odunze a little bit. It seems to me the bigger receivers seem to be struggling in that first year. Just kind of the guys that don't naturally create separation, that have to get the play strength development. And I think, I wonder if like part of this isn't like, you think like way back, like the 3-year breakout used to be a thing for wide receivers. And I think that back in that time, teams were gearing more towards the bigger receivers that could win outside, and everybody was like the Drew Bledsoe, like the quarterback stands tall in the pocket and these receivers have to win against press man coverage in a tight window. And I think that in that era, it was a real struggle of figuring out just the strength to be able to play the receiver position when you've been the biggest, strongest, fastest against every single guy that you've gone against your entire career. And I think that there might be some of it now where we see so many rookie receivers flash, but they all kind of tend to be the natural separator guys that the Lad McConkey that can run routes that spin you around and make you fall down. Whereas the physical receivers, it seemed like there's a real struggle that first year. And I think the reports on McMillan have kind of played into that, where he's kind of struggled to just win against JC Horn's kind of been against him most often, but to get immediately open, those types of things, in the similar vein of what we've seen from like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Ruma Dunze that first year. Whereas Leggett is kind of more like year 2, kind of figured it out a little bit. You got your feet underneath you a little bit. And I think that we tend to forget that Leggett is a massive human and very, very fast and very explosive with the ball in his hands. And I think that there's certainly concerns, and you've pointed them out very accurately, about his ability to actually catch the football. But I think that when it comes to his ability to create after the catch, his ability to potentially learn a lot more this second year, to be able to get open sooner. And I think that with Bryce Young at quarterback, that's going to be really important to get open sooner. And so I think that Leggett is primed to be my bold prediction to be the go-to Tampa or Carolina receiver.
I can see that. And I've probably been lower on Tatara McMillan than anybody all year, mainly because for the reasons you said. And I love the connection you made as kind of a theory to posit about bigger receivers versus smaller receivers. Because if you're a smaller receiver, you're leveraging quickness. How do you do that? You have to be precise with your footwork and understand how to use your quickness as a trap to get people to go in the wrong direction.
Yep.
And so you've already had to learn patience and suddenness. Every receiver in the NFL who can run a good route has learned that the execution of the moves that they've learned are done with patience and suddenness. Dave Kluge and I watched some film this spring, a little bit of Trey Harris. He wanted to watch Trey Harris. And I was like, here's a different, and I showed him tape of Trey Harris, Devontae Adams, and Chad Ochocinco. I think it was Chad Ochocinco. And I said, okay, so let's watch Trey Harris perform like a too quick or a stick or a couple of different release moves against the line of scrimmage. You say that's a very clear execution of that technique. But let's go watch Devontae Adams do it. And it looked like a totally different move because Trey Harris just said, here, and there was no story to it. But he's big, he's fast, he's strong. He's better than 99% of the amateurs who play football, and that's enough. But when you're not bigger and stronger and you're only a little faster, you have to do something more to tell that story. And that's what took Devontae Adams 3 years to figure out. And now he's masterful at what he does. And you can see it, that it's the idea of drawing them in with a different, slower pace and then really violently delivering it. And so I haven't seen Tatara McMillan do that at all. And that doesn't mean that he can't learn it, but is he learning it this summer? If from the indications of what you just described, no, not yet. And he's going to face the number one corner every week unless they put him inside. And he hasn't practiced inside. Adam Thielen's practiced inside all year. Jalen Coker's practiced inside all year. Unless Bryce Young told him to the side and said, hey, just in case of injury, let's work on some slot plays off to the side. And let's bring another 11 guys into the practice with us so that we can practice running against these defenses. It didn't happen. So he's not ready to be moved around. He's not going to get the Drake London treatment that London's getting. And he is Drake London first year worse because he can't catch as strongly as London can. And I don't think he's as good of a route runner as London was. So, yeah, to me, this one, I don't understand. Like, God bless Mike Clay, and he does fantastic work at ESPN. But I think the 1,100 yards there is based on modeling, more about draft capital and size and those types of marks than actually seeing how techniques translate to film and translate to the next level. And you're right. I think that's a great theory. I mean, the idea of like smaller versus bigger, and that's why the bigger ones are struggling, is that they could just win off of brute strength, size, and length, and they had enough speed to win there. But in the NFL, they haven't practiced them. That's why, I mean, Malik Neighbors and Ladd McConkey can run circles around McMillan as a route runner. They were ready for the pros last year on College tape in relative.
And who got that number one coverage last year for the Panthers as a rookie? It was a size guy, and it was Xavier Legette. And now he's coming back, and he's got that second year of putting some things together. And every single report that I have seen out of the Panthers is that like McMillan and Legette are locked in as the top two receivers, and Coker basically, some of it was, I think that that's another guy that I feel like it was a cross key merit. Like things got over the skis a little bit with him of I think that the Vikings, they realize you're going to give us a 4th round pick for 35-year-old Adam Thielen, and we don't think we're a playoff team. We're absolutely going to take a 4th round pick for 35-year-old Adam Thielen. We'll absolutely, and I think it had a lot more to do with that. They also liked Bryce Tremaine. It's a weird story, but their offensive coordinator recruited Bryce Tremaine to Stanford back in 2017, and that was a practice squad guy that made the team. And so, like, their offensive coordinator has known him for nearly 10 years at this point, and so that was part of it. And then Renfro was passable as the slot receiver there. They brought him back, and Jimmy Horn, they drafted him, and he kind of earned his role with return, but also as the slot receiver. But I think it's fascinating. We really have gotten spoiled with some of the rookies, with Justin Jefferson, with Jamar Chase. And I think that it's natural for these big receivers that, and even those guys were just so refined in terms of route runners for rare packages of players. But I think that's an interesting one. And another guy too, that I think under the radar, Puka Nacua is so the Rams, another team that I've covered, and this might go into hot take territory, but I think Davante Adams is going to lead the Rams in targets, maybe comfortably lead the Rams in targets.
I've been believing that all summer.
Yeah. And Nacua is a guy that I think, because he's a very fun player, and it's the found money theory that always makes guys more appetizing. But just in general, every bit of talk around the Rams has been how raw he is and how much development needs to happen with him as a receiver. And I think it's going to be the type of thing of they brought in. I think it's lost on what really happened with the Davante Adams move, and it opens up so much more of the playbook of Cooper Kupp had gotten to the point where he can only stand in this one spot, basically. And it made the rest of the receivers have to also stand in one spot. And Adams can do it all. And I think it's going to be a lot more of the like master apprentice type of approach of like, we're going to have a year here of you watching Davante Adams do all the things that a number one receiver needs to do. And then it will be true takeoff time for Nacua. But I'd never understood why. And Davante Adams was falling. It was like falling into the 5th round almost sometimes. But like in last year,
there's a redraft team I have without Davante Adams. Maybe one. Yeah, I'm with you. And Nacua to me was a Golden Tate type of player. Like that was how I saw him, was an aspiring Golden Tate, a guy you can put over the middle, let him run over the middle, maybe run some corner routes. He can go up and get it. He can catch on the run, and he can do damage that way. But
and they really had him do that smash route. Like was like all he was doing is like his rookie year, basically.
Yeah. So he is a highly coveted fantasy producer who is a good guy and a player that's fun to watch and does great in the role that he has. I don't want to say he's Chase Claypool or Kenny Golladay, but he's an overrated player relative to his production in terms of where he's at. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, is that you can have a ways to go to become the player you are capable of being and still be an elite producer or a near elite producer. I think we're going to see that with Caleb Williams this year. I think we're going to, I think people are like, oh, he's got years to unlearn bad habits. And, oh, he's getting coached hard, and Ben Johnson's frustrated with them in practice. I heard our buddy Wood say that in our roundtable. And I'm, listen, from what I've heard, actually, he's wanted to be coached hard. They're trying to get him to the Jared Goff standard of what the Lions did statistically. But Goff was a fourth-year quarterback when he first started. And considering what Williams did with that, like, dumpster fire in there, people, you need to understand, like, there was a guy who was a very good quarterback. Maybe, he got more love because he got Super Bowl rings and had a great team around him. But Troy Aikman played in an awful Dallas situation early in his career. He got the fecal matter kicked out of him. Okay. I mean, it was bad. And he persisted and became a winning quarterback, a good quarterback, dare say a great quarterback for what they asked him to do. Peyton Manning was just dumping off passes and throwing to Marshall Faulk and throwing interceptions left and right with the Colts year one. Okay. I mean, John Elway, you would have heard Terry Bradshaw talk about what a dumpster fire he was as a rookie, if you lived as long as I have, to hear that. And then he did it with Aaron Rodgers too. Terry doesn't like some of those quarterbacks. I think he's a little jealous sometimes. Too bad. He's a great quarterback. He was a great quarterback. You don't need to be jealous of anybody. But other than maybe he's jealous that they weren't getting the treatment that he got when his body was hung in effigy in Three River Stadium. Again, Pittsburgh fans, but the thing being is it's one of those deals where you have to understand that Williams, what he did, he was the only quarterback in that class who could have gone through that and go through what he's going through right now. And I cannot wait, because next year they're going to talk about how great he was, like Jordan Love that first year, because he's going to put up top 12 numbers, maybe even top 6 numbers if it really comes together. And it's not a big margin from 12 to 6. I've calculated from my projections. It's about 3 passes per game, folks. If he gets 27.5 yards more per game than I projected for him, which I projected 4,000 yards and 31 touchdowns, and say 1 out of those 9 extra passes in every 3 games is a touchdown, he's at 4,600 yards and 37 touchdowns at a 69% completion rate rather than the 65% completion rate. And everyone's going to be kissing his hind parts about how he's become great. And Ben Johnson's probably going to say, we've still got a ways to go with Caleb Williams to learn this offense, but he did good with what we asked him to do, because Ben's learning to coach him hard. This kid could be a 50 touchdown prospect one day. That's what he could be. The fact that we're going to be excited about a 37 touchdown season tells you where this kid's talent is. And it's not going to take him years to unlearn a decade of bad habits, unless you're a backup quarterback who ran out of the end zone in Detroit. Okay. That if you're at that level, then yeah, it might take you decades to unlearn those habits. But that's my hot take for the hot take artist, so.
I'm very much with you on Caleb Williams. I wrote an article this summer where it really, I dove into just called it the curse of expectations, but the expectation around him and the way that dynasty teams, where you got dynasty players that had never watched him play in college, that were losing because of Caleb Williams. And like we see, like Arch Manning is going through it now, where like people had never watched him play, and they watched that one game this past weekend against a NFL level Matt Patricia, calling just the whole bag of zone blitzes that he possibly could, that will do way more good than harm for Arch Manning. But you've got people now that they will not watch another college game until like the national championship game this year, that have decided that Arch Manning is not going to work. He's just a bust now. And
Yep.
and I think that like Caleb Williams run into it. I think Ollie Gordon maybe is a case of this a little bit, where it's like these guys that, especially that sophomore year, that they just explode that sophomore year, and they know, everybody knows, like, this is an NFL player, but they have to go back because they just can't go to the NFL. They can't sit out for a year. They have no other choice, and it flips the game from being like, I need to establish myself, I need to be an elite player, I need to do this, to I just need to get help to be to the end of the year healthy is all I need to do. And then my entire rest of my life is taking off from that point. I think that there was some of that in the last year there with Caleb Williams. I think that had he been at literally probably any other school but Southern Cal, and like the painted fingernails, like these types of things like come into the package that decide that he's a soft player. And I don't think there's anything true to that at all. I think that it's a guy that was put into an impossible situation. And then when you look at the games that he put together last year, it was the list of players who accomplished the same things that he did statistically was basically Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and Caleb Williams was the entire list of players that did hit certain thresholds in some games. But then there were the other games where it was like 50 passing yards, just like the bottom of the barrel type of situation. But I completely agree with you that, and especially like Dynasty Superflex, like if you can go grab Caleb, you will not have another opportunity in the next 10 to 15 years to get Caleb Williams as cheap as you can get him right now, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing, we love football. We love the players, we love the stories, but as American media and advertising and they tend to sell towards simplicity and lack of nuance. And that's what sells. That's what they think sells. That's what they've backed up to say it sells, and that they want to reinforce that because the businessmen who are involved in media before, when media was kind of something that could be kind of separated from business to an extent, got involved. But now we want to commodify everything. And as a result of that, if somebody's a little different, but even back then, somebody was a little different than what society liked, they were denigrated. And then eventually they're either lionized because they stand it firm on their principles. And now then they're celebrated for having a backbone when they were excoriated for having a backbone. That's just how it works. The first, it's just like fantasy, when you make that pick, when you make that Najee Harris pick, or if it turns out to be a Ladd McConkey pick, you're celebrated. If it turns out to be, say, Luther Burden never emerges from the third spot on the depth chart, you're an idiot. And you go back and forth from being honored to excoriated. That's how it works if you're going to be bold. But the thing I would say to you is don't worry about that noise. Be bold, make the choices that you've done the research on and what you believe in and stick with it. And you'll probably end up working out more as long as you don't get shy because, I made a mistake and I'm a people pleaser and I can't be criticized at all. And I can't look wrong because they're going to make fun of me. And then you're going to get make fun of more because you're worried about people making fun of you, or what they're going to say to you at work or your church league or wherever you are, picking players that you took chances on. No, man, just keep going. Adam Harstead and I had a good conversation about this afternoon on our first Film in Theory this year. It was like, you trade, if you're 100% on your trades, as Adam said, you're not trading enough.
Right.
And we compared notes on like worst trades. And I was like, well, you can't have a worse trade than me. I traded for Byron Leftwich and gave up Michael Vick. Like, how bad you can't even go. He goes, no. He goes, I traded away, who did he say? Demaryius Thomas and another top receiver for Dion Lewis. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I mean, we stunk up the joint for about 5 minutes talking about that. Now he jokes. He goes, I traded, it's Devontae Adams and Demaryius Thomas for Dion Lewis. And I was like, woo, okay, you taught me there. He's like, yeah, but I won a championship with Dion Lewis on a fluke game in week 17. And he goes, so now I can reterm this as I traded Devontae Adams and Demaryius Thomas for a championship. You know, who cares really who I traded for? I just traded for a championship. I'm going, yeah, well, you definitely saved your way out of that. But yeah, I mean, just have fun with this, folks. Know that things aren't going to go the way you want to early on. Don't overreact, you know, and believe in what you did the research in, and then make the adjustments where you need to after you've seen 3 or 4 weeks of what's going on. Unless there's an injury, like if tomorrow Saquon Barkley, you know, if let's hope it doesn't happen, but say the turf monster in Dallas has a megalodon underneath it and that actually lives in artificial turf somehow and bites off Saquon Barkley's leg. And now we're told that Will Shipley will be the guy, or we know that for sure, and it's not anybody else, then sure, you're going to spend a boatload on Will Shipley. But if Christian McCaffrey suffers from that and they're like, well, it's going to start with this guy, but we don't know for sure, then don't blow the whole load on Brian Robinson just yet. Though I would say probably it's more likely Brian Robinson will be the guy in this case rather than just Will Shipley on his own. But that's another story. Let's hope neither of those things happen.
Yes. And hopefully we have a happy and healthy year. And thank you all so much for joining us. It's just fantastic to be back, to be back in being, well, right now we're in a weather delay, so we're not able to watch the game that we love, but to be able to put aside the speculation and just watch and see and enjoy things unfolding and see where, just allow the direction to take you and react as best as you can. And for myself, for my friend Matt Waldman, for the entire Football Guys family, we thank you all.